This is our most recent addition. This is a Marine One, or a replica of a Marine One helicopter. The helicopter that the president rides in. You know, when the president leaves the White House and he goes out on the South Lawn and gets in a helicopter that takes him over to the Air Force Base, where he gets on Air Force One and flies wherever it is he's going around the country or the world for that matter. But he gets in a SH-3 helicopter, just like this. It never was a Marine One helicopter, but the Navy gave us permission. If we took it to restore it, they gave us permission to paint it as if it was, if it were a Marine One helicopter. Her life started as a anti-submarine helicopter, but and that's what she did her whole life. But we wanted to tell the story of a local aviator, Mack Reynolds. Mack Reynolds was born here in Bowling Green, graduated from high school at Bowling Green High and Western Kentucky University, joined the Marines, and became a helicopter pilot. Served a distinguished career as a helicopter pilot for the Marines. Served 2 tours in the Marine One squadron, the squadron that handles the president, vice president, cabinet members, and any member of Congress, high rollers that they need to go someplace, while the Marine One squadron, their MNX-1 squadron there, and fly them. So that's what they look like. Exactly, this is the exact paint scheme of the Marine One squadron there at in Washington, D.C. You can see the presidential seal. This comes off. We've riveted it so it doesn't come off, but the presidential seal isn't on this helicopter unless the president is aboard. If they take this off, they have several of these, and if the president isn't aboard, like it's a support for a trip wherever he's going, they'll take that shield off so the president's not aboard. Whatever he's aboard, whether it's this kind of helicopter or another helicopter or Air Force One that people see, that's this big 747, or much smaller airplanes, when he comes aboard, their call sign changes to Air Force One, or in this case, Marine One. Mack served 2 tours, as I said. First president that he flew was the first George Bush. It was while Bush was the vice president for Reagan, but he flew Reagan, he flew Bush, he flew Bill Clinton, and he also was the presidential pilot for the second George Bush. Like I say, he served a tour with the Marine One squadron, and then he left and went and did several other tours as a Marine helicopter pilot. In fact, he commanded a Marine squadron of helicopters, but then he was reassigned to Marine One to be the commander. And so he was the commander of the Marine One squadron there in Washington for a 2-year tour. He retired from the Marines, and then he went to work for Sikorsky aircraft company. They made these helicopters. Sikorsky is a big helicopter manufacturer, and he went to work for them for a while, and then he retired from that, and they moved back to Bowling Green. He and his wife and family moved back to Bowling Green, and he worked for a couple of companies around, but he always wanted to be a helicopter pilot. So he went to work for a company here in the Bowling Green area that flew life flight helicopters. They would go and take people from the hospital that needed to get to Vanderbilt and Nashville, or they'd go to an accident scene and pick up injured people and take them to the hospital down in Nashville or wherever. And he did that for several years, and then he retired. And in the meantime, while his daughters had grown up and had a family, and they lived down in North Carolina, so he and his wife sold their home here, and they moved down there so they could be closer to their grandkids. And it was while he was there that he suffered a massive heart attack, and he passed away. But we wanted to tell the story of Mack Reynolds, who was a tremendous hero for us here in Bowling Green, because he flew all these presidents. And so we wanted to tell that story, and we looked and looked and looked for a helicopter. There is a helicopter at the Ronald Reagan Museum, and like this, and there's one on display down at Pensacola at the Naval Museum, and there's also one that's a static display outside the base where the Marine One flies out of. But this one right here, as far as we know, we couldn't get any of those helicopters, but we got this one that they allowed us to paint as if it were a Marine One helicopter. And we got her in Jacksonville, Florida. We needed to get her out of there quickly because it had been sitting around there at the Naval Air Station, and the commander there was getting tired of this helicopter being there. And so they asked us if we could go get her pretty quickly, and we said absolutely. And so, post haste, we went down there and got her, brought her back here, and we put her together in a shelter that's right over there that we're going to go look at here in just a few minutes. But that's where we restored her, and then we taxied her out here and put her on display right here on her pad. Next airplane we want to talk about is a T-38. We want to tell the story of Terry Wilcutt. Terry Wilcutt was born in a small town not too far from here, Russellville, Kentucky, but his family moved away when he was young. But he came back to Bowling Green and graduated from Western Kentucky University to be a fighter pilot. Well, first of all, he started teaching math in college, and he was talking to his brother, and his brother convinced him that, hey, you want to be a fighter pilot. So after he graduated from Western Kentucky University, he joined the United States Marine Corps and earned his wings, and he flew as a fighter pilot for the Marines for several years. And then he applied for and was accepted to test pilot school, and he became a test pilot for in the Marines, and he tested many airplanes, flew with them for a while, and then he applied for astronaut training, and he was accepted. And then he was an astronaut for NASA for several years, and he flew on 5 space shuttle missions, 3 of which he was the mission commander. And so we looked and looked and looked for, couldn't get a space shuttle here in little old Bowling Green, Kentucky, but we settled for T-38. The astronauts, even today, still fly T-38s for continuation training, and it just so happens that if you take the T-38 and put the throttles at idle and put the speed brakes out, you can just about fly the landing pattern that the shuttle flies when it comes back from space with no engines. And so they would practice that with the T-38. They also used T-38 to fly around the country when they would go do briefings and just for administrative purposes. And we wanted to get a T-38, and lo and behold, one became available in the boneyard out in Tucson, Arizona. And so we went to get him, and that's where we got the Huey, in the boneyard. And we went to get it and brought it here, and it was in pretty good shape, so it didn't take us too awfully long to restore that. But listen to this. How many men walked? Who was the first man to walk on the moon?
Do you know?
Do you know? Who was the first
Armstrong.
man? Neil Armstrong. What did he say? He said that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. When we got this T-38, we asked NASA for the history of who had flown this airplane. And when we got the list from NASA, we couldn't believe it. Neil Armstrong sat in the seat of this airplane. Not only that, how many men walked on the moon? 12. All 12 men who have walked on the moon sat in the seat of this airplane. We couldn't believe it. Every one of the initial Mercury astronauts, John Glenn, every one of the Gemini astronauts flew in this airplane. And many of the astronauts and cosmonauts that we saw on the list flew in this airplane. So when we have a school bus drive up here for a tour, I bring them over here and I say, put your hand on this airplane. And then I'll ask, it's a history lesson, I'll ask. Somebody always knows Neil Armstrong. But then when I say how many men walked on the moon, that gets a little bit harder. But anyway, it's a history lesson for that. I works for NASA and Chief of Safety. But he is a local, came here when we dedicated the airplane for a hangar party, and out here, he was here. And so was the director of NASA. NASA came here. It was such a big deal. They came here. And is a real hero for us, Bowling Green, Kentucky, and we're really honored to be able to have an airplane here to tell his story.